city clerk. It is now council special meeting agenda for Monday, December 4th, 2023 at 9. Roll call. Mayor Avalos, present. Vice Mayor Hurtado,
Present.
Councilman Manuel,
Present.
Councilman Naina, present. Councilman Rios,
Present.
City Clerk Grace excused, City Treasurer De La Paz,
Present.
City Manager Houston,
Present.
and City Attorney Salinas.
Present.
Any compensation disclosure, pursuant to Government Code Section 549.3, disclosure of compensation for meeting attendance for city council members is $790 monthly regardless of the amount of meetings. Thank you, Madam Secretary. At this point, I'd like to welcome members of the audience that are here in council chambers as well as on Zoom. In the agenda is indicated that we're having closed session first. However, I would like to make a motion so that we can go straight into the open session. Agenda portion, item number 1, receive and file a presentation of Ms. 1439. Do I have a second? There's a first and a second. Roll call. Councilman Rolo,
Yes.
Councilman Davila, Councilman Rios,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hurtado,
Yes.
and Yaros. Yes. So, give it over to our city attorney. Open session right now. That is correct. We're going into open session. Item number 1, the city council will receive and file a presentation from the city attorney on SB 1439 and any relevant fair political practice commission rules related to this law, which became effective January 1st, 2023. The city council may or may not have additional requests for possible follow-up by the city attorney's office relating to future city council agenda items. City attorney.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Happy to be here. I want to give sort of a headline summary of what I hope to accomplish today. Before I do that, though, I think we should recognize our new city manager. This is his inaugural city council meeting, first one ever. So, welcome, Mr. City Manager Rob Houston.
Thank you, Mark. Glad to be here.
Well, so Rob and I also met a little bit beforehand, and maybe a little bit of the Rob and Raul show going on here. We're gonna do a little Q&A session here, so you can see some interplay there. But what do I hope to accomplish here at tonight's city council meeting? One, I hope to encourage you, and if you remember anything about my presentation today, is that this is a developing area of the law. And whenever it's a developing area of the law, it means that you have to be mindful of constant updates and changes there. My sense is that the Levine Act, which had been around in its origin and was applicable to just a small number of local agencies, now applies statewide. And it applies in a manner and context that before never really previously fully considered. And I think to some extent, my own humble opinion of the Fair Political Practice Commission is commonly caught a little bit flat-footed in how they are interpreting the statute. So look for 2024, there to be constant updates about the Levine Act. Okay, what is the Levine Act in its most essence? It simply prevents a council member or an officer. An officer in this case can include an appointed person. One of the questions Rob is going to ask that which means that our planning commissioners should also be prepped. We should also reach out to them, even though they are not seeking contributions, to the extent that they receive anything of value that is $250 or more, then they should be educated on the applicability of this, because they deal with many of the very things that you deal with, the issuance of conditional use permits, encroachments, things of that sort. So, walkway here is you have to pay attention to the ongoing constant updates of the Levine Act. B, it applies to $250 contributions that you may receive from a participant, from an agent, or from another, in some instances, even another candidate, and from a party. So let's talk about what all those mean. For example, What I want to do is have you take a look at the slide presentation. We can go to the next slide, please, under the Levine Act. So let's just read that briefly. It includes an officer of a local government agency. An officer is a term of art which includes both elected and appointed individuals. The local government agency, that means the city of Southgate, for participating in the award of a contract. The award includes influencing and having, it's more than just voting. It is having any kind of role to play in the award of that contract. So you should stay away from that. If he or she receives any political contributions, not just any kind of contribution, but political contributions, totaling more than $250 in the 12 months preceding the pendency of the contract award. The pendency is a key term there. So you may say, well, do I count from the day that the contract decision comes before me, Rob?
Well, that's what I was gonna ask, is that, so if you received your first month $100 and say 11 months later got $200, where does that make you stand in this whole $250 number?
Yeah, so at that point, you know how much money you received, you've aggregated that, but you have to take a look at, and the city needs to provide support, is when did the application come? When was the matter first pending? In this case, under the law, under the statute, a matter is pending once the initial application is made. So it may be that, you know, at the time that you got the award, the application may have been filed, or may not have been filed at that time. It still counts from 12 months preceding the pendency of the contract award. So for the next 12 months, you have to be careful of that. So it's for 3 months following the final decision, you're not allowed to do that. So if you get a contract, if you get a dollar amount to $300 in the Rob scenario, you got to look back and say, is there a contract that is pending right now? It may not be the final decision. What's pending here? Am I precluded from making a decision there, right? And let's pause and think about the policy decision there. What is the Act trying to do? The Act is trying to instill truth and transparency in the decision-making process. You have an applicant, someone seeking a permit from the city, that makes the application to the city 12 months before they decide they're going to give you a contract, or sometime within that time period there. You have, and what they want to do is they want to grow favor with you. The Act is intended to prevent you from voting on those kinds of contracts, right? Because if you fall within the window clause, it's a very stringent statute from that perspective. And it applies to 3 months following the decision. You're not allowed to act on that. Let's go to the next slide here.
Can I ask you a question since you are talking specifically about that? Say the majority or all of the council members accepted a contribution during the election cycle in the amount of 300. We're using the 300 just as an example. Are they able to vote on that contract now if they received it?
That's where we would
Within the last 11 months. Okay. But the election is already over, and all of the committees have been terminated. So how does the city figure to make it appropriate to have at least one council member vote, or at least to have enough for a quorum to be able to vote?
Right, and so the Levine Act contemplates that. It contemplates that the business of the city has to go forward, and it can't stop. And we've had this in other scenarios unrelated to the Levine Act, where more than 3 or more of you are conflicted out for one reason or the other. And what do? We end up picking straws. We end up getting the longest toothpick or the shortest toothpick. And there's a random choice that is made so that we're able to get 3 individuals to be able to vote on an item. We need at least 3 members of the council to act in most cases. And so we would, depending on how many council members were subject to conflict, then we would end up doing the way that
Say we all got it, all five of us.
I'm sorry?
Say all five of us got a political contribution.
Three of you would have to, all five of you
All
would
five of us.
participate in the random selection.
But we've already closed our committees. In order for us to refund the difference, would we have to use our personal funds then? Or would we have to use, or would we have to go back and reopen the committee? I'm looking for guidance in that aspect, because that is a scenario that can definitely happen on this council or any council for that matter.
It's a fair question, Madam Mayor. I think that's one of those questions I'll get back to you on, whether it has to, if there's no money in the committee, in the campaign account, for example, like what do you do? On the one hand, on the other hand, you want to make sure that that reimbursement is not coming from outside funds, because that would end up.
So that's my question, that we have to put in our own money to be able to cure it.
It seems to me, subject to, we'll get back, we'll put together a little list of questions to follow up on. It seems to me that that money should be coming out of your own personal funds, that can be traced to your own personal account. So there's no question that the money is coming from the third person, since you're the one that would benefit from the contribution to that hypothetical.
And Mr. City Attorney, if I may, just to let you know, when this whole thing started with the Levine Act and a lot of confusion as a result of that, I actually reached out to some of the people who passed this law in Sacramento. They're just as confused as anybody else.
Yeah, that's
I'm
what
not lying to you. I asked them, what happens in this scenario? You know what they said? That's when most things would have to get back with you. No different than what's happening here.
So again, I'm glad you said that, Vice Mayor Obama, because this is a developing area of the law. So, and the onus is on each one of you, right? You could go to, I'll let Ms. Houston speak about how much support the city staff can give, but at the end of the day, the ultimate responsibility for complying with the statute lies with you guys. You can take advice from the city manager, you can listen to the city attorney, but there's no defense to the penalty by saying, well, I listened to the city manager, this is the advice they gave me, or I listened to the city manager, city attorney, this is the advice they gave me. There's no defense counsel defense.
No.
In that sense.
And what I did is I asked the question, I said, well, look, if you're confused, and our staff is going to try to interpret this for us so that we can make sure that we're not in violation of anything, what's your recommendation? They said, well, sadly, we passed nearly 400 laws this past year, and did we read all of it? Probably not. And this is one of those that the interpretation is being left up to the FPPC. So I would recommend that if there's any issue whatsoever, that you reach out to the FPPC. And I was told that they were going to reach out to you on this from Anthony Rendone's office.
They have not yet.
They have not. Okay,
So I'm waiting with bated breath on that, Vice Mayor. Let's go to the next slide, because I want to time this presentation. Sorry, just a minute, to understand the procedural, the way we're doing it. Do you want us to be back and forth question during the presentation? I'm open to that, yes. I just wanted to make sure so that way, if any council member did have a question in the middle of the process that we could ask. Right, and here's what my own desire, my walk away from this presentation is going to be. I wanted to raise more questions and answers. What I want us to do is just issue spot. I want you to be aware of an issue when an issue comes up. You may not have an answer yet, but it's important for you to at least recognize, hey, I'm getting close to a potential Levine Act situation. Let me make sure I take a note of it. Let me ask questions. Let me make sure that we're on solid ground. That's really what I'm trying to make sure you do too. It's important to ask questions. We may not have all the answers tonight, but it's important to do that. Rob, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I hear what you're all saying, and a lot of legislation can come out without everything tied up, and I think a legal term I've heard from lawyers in my career is abundance of caution, and I think maybe that's part of this too, is just being aware of anything that could trip anybody up, you know, usually unintentionally, and making sure there's awareness as you're doing, and let's talk about it together, work through it. You know, questions could be asked, do some research, and then make sure everybody's safe is really, I think, the whole right.
Okay, and with that, Councilor Burrows, do you have a question?
I do. So just to have some clarification on this. I know in our normal proceedings when we live close to an area, we accuse ourselves based on our proximity to the location. But sometimes we're given the ability to vote because it's not something that benefits me personally, but it's at large the entire city. So for like, the trash contracts, our street sweeper, things that are service provided to the entire community, the entire city. If we were to receive contributions or donations over that 250, and let's say we all receive it and we could enact, there is nothing that says that, based on my interpretation of it, that the body as the council cannot act on a vote. It was just going to be randomly selected as we would normally. Is that correct?
Well, if I understand the question is, if all 5 of you receive a donation from a party or a participant or an agent, one of those 3 categories, right? Could you still participate in that notwithstanding here? If all 5 of you fall within the scope of the Levine Act, and you all receive a contribution, then you'd all be disqualified, and then another set of rules comes into play that would make 3 of you eligible to participate.
Right. So that's the process that would happen in that case. What is
And you'd have to, all 5 of you would have to disclose.
right? So I think the question that I have is, what's going to be our city's process in the disclosure? Are we, once we receive that amount over the 250, what process would the city like for the council to have to be able to disclose?
I think as I interpret the Levine Act, when the item comes up before you as a council, or before a planning commission, or any other commission where this act would apply, you're required to disclose the basis for your disqualification. I, Josh Brown, received more than $250 contribution from a person who is either an applicant, i.e. a party to this proceeding, an agent of the applicant, or a participant who has a financial interest in the outcome of this proceeding. Under the Levine Act, I'm required to recuse myself, and I hereby recuse myself and leave the chambers and not participate in this proceeding. Does that sound right to you? Yeah. That's typically how we've done other disclosures, and it's built upon the spirit of the intent of that. Yeah, Councilmember.
Yeah, thank you, yeah, so in the past, we were able to receive the contributions, and so you're saying, and if you feel that, like anybody else, I mean, a lot of elected officials receive a lot of contributions from different sources, so this says that you can't vote on an issue within a year, basically.
Essentially.
And receiving that, but if it was last year, it's okay.
Yeah, so just me, it's the statute ties to 12 months from the pendency of the application. So it's not a calendar year, it's a rolling 12-month basis that you have to have a look back on that. And so it's going to require, prior to the day of council, a little bit of homework on both your part and the city's part. Right? The city's not going to know, for example, who gave you contributions unless you disclose those, either through Form 770 or local campaign contribution forms or the like. And so, we're developing processes at the staff level that would require disclosures from the participants, from the parties, where they themselves would be required to make a disclosure to help out the process.
What I want clarification is, in the past, before this law, we were able to, there was nothing wrong with receiving contribution and still voting on it.
That's correct.
So now that all changes.
For certain proceedings. Permits, gave you. And we'll go through those in a little bit, but some of the examples that would apply to us would be conditional use permits, for example, street abandonments, we've done some of that, rezoning of real estates, parcels, tentative subdivisions, tract maps, zoning variances, things that are of a discretionary nature, typically dealing with real property interests.
And just to make sure that everybody understands this started from donations starting January 1st of 2023. Any contributions before that were not applicable to the league.
That's correct. So if you got a contribution of more than $250 on 12/31 of 2022, it's outside of the 12-month cycle.
And I'm not,
It's not
trying
retroactive.
to receive any money in this group from
Well,
January 1st.
it just doesn't, it doesn't look back before 1/1/2023. Okay?
So then, just to clarify, so then you're not gonna get back to me on my question because you just answered it. So if all five of us received a contribution from a specific vendor, then all of us need to recuse ourselves.
And then we draw lots and 3 will get chosen.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
If the vendor has business that qualifies under the Levine Act, and if it was within 12 months of the pendency of the application, yes.
And we just have to say, I'm recusing myself because of this. Everybody has to individually say, I'm recusing myself. When all 5 of us state it, then we draw lots, and then the 3 lucky people.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter if one of you got $300, one of you got $500.
Anything over 250.
The threshold is $250 and a penny. That's your threshold right there. And so that you have to disclose that.
And city attorney, does that include also gifts, not only contributions?
Political, I read the statute mean political contributions.
Okay, thank you for.
Political contributions. The gifts come within a different category than the regulated political contributions. Okay, let's go to the, thank you for this, I love this. Issues finance is most important, right? Next slide, please. And we've gone through some of this. This slide here reflects a donation of $250. It can go in different categories. That money can go to an officer. Again, what's an officer? Council member who's elected and an appointed official.
This isn't a private staff, or anything like that, just
Like an appointment. No, I mean, it also applies to employees, but employees have a different set of rules that they have to go by.
They're not impacted by this.
They don't know.
Well, they don't vote, they don't get political contribution. Right?
Just for clarity, nobody heard Councilmember Rios' question. It's not for this law is not meant for employees because they're not voting on an item that's part of the section.
Yes, that's one of the policies that's being served by the state.
And even though you're going to go through this with our commissioners, I'm not aware of any commissioner receiving any donations for anything. They were not campaign accounts, they don't campaign. But I guess it's good for them to know anyway, but.
Well, it may be in the future, one of your commissioners decides to run, he or she may run.
Right. But it also applies to a person who's not appointed or elected, but they're going to run for office.
Yes, that's
So it's
true.
anyway, so it's not.
Potentially. It also applies to somebody who ran for office and lost, and then gets appointed to a commission.
Yeah.
So there's a look back provision to that. Okay, again, issues 5 there. So, the money can go anywhere, it can go to, one of the officers, a candidate, who's not an officer, is still subject to that. The money can go, to a committee of that, individual, and money can go from one council member to another council member, right? So, Raul Salinas gives money, Raul Salinas gives money to the elected officials. Candidate, council member A receives a political contribution from a participant, and council member A has a fundraiser for council member B. It supports council member B by writing a check notified to that individual. But what I have not read in any of the meetings, any of the literature out there, what do you do with commingled funds? Right? That's, I've not seen anything that should. But what if council member A commingles the contribution from a agent into council member A's account, and then writes a check to council member B, if there's already enough money to cover it independent of that contribution, nice to commingle, is that taking all the money? Just not clear. Those are some of the problems that have not yet been addressed by the commingling.
Question for you, Councilmember A writes a check to Councilmember B, but it's a personal check, it's not a contribution check.
Personal check out of personal funds, doesn't, you don't have to worry about it coming out of, from an agent or participant, because it's not coming from. Right?
Yeah, but I think here's the question I had regarding that. If I write a check to an individual who's running next year, and then they win and we're doing reassignments of committees, am I able to vote for that person to join that committee since I gave that person, that candidate a check for over $200?
I think at the time, that's an interesting question, at the time, that decision was not pending, was it? Committee assignment wasn't pending at that time.
Right.
And it doesn't involve a permit or license of real estate issue.
Okay.
So it's not a blanket across the board prohibition.
I think that's what we're going to need to get really good clarity on is what falls within those parameters of what, this law is meant to.
And I talked to Rob a little bit, but today's his first day, so he hasn't had a chance to get into this understandably. But I do think that one of the areas where staff can help is in the agenda, much like we have fiscal impact, we have background analysis, attachments. Maybe there's a little section there that says this item may be looking at susceptible, right, to help you out. It doesn't mean that it applies to any private you can receive contributions, but it just may be there. Rob also has some ideas about having the disclosure form circulated.
Yeah, just, there are some samples from that, Raul was able to pull together where, when the applicant is putting in their application, they can actually have a disclosure that says, here's the council members I contributed to, and they self-disclose, and that can, I think the key thing is, it's gonna not feel appropriate for the staff, any of the staff to be trying to ask questions of any of the parties, be they council members or contractors. I heard maybe a rumor that you may have, it's gotta be self-disclosure from council, self-disclosure from the applicants to keep, the staff just being, neutral in the whole discussion, but the self-disclosure seemed like perhaps a good idea to allow, in a sense, to just clear up any concerns.
Right, so we'll be working on it.
And it would be a self-disclosure of the donation in the last 4 months.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're bringing all this stuff up because when I was reading the packet and you read from the FPPC, a lot of the language appears to be not addressed to council members, but to applicants.
Yes.
Right, when you read it, it says, what is the procedure, or the proceeding involving the license permit and so on. And it basically says that, it's asking them to identify whether they gave a contribution to the elected official. So as I was reading this, it seems like a lot of this was holding them just as much accountable for the disclosure of that information. But again, at the end of the day, when we're up here, we're the ones who have to kind of sort of keep track and especially when something comes up that we disclose it.
Not sort of, but you actually have to.
Which is what we have done, yeah. Well, what I'm getting at is that even though a lot of the language is directed at the applicants, it leaves it at the end of the day as elected or appointed officials as having to be the ones that disclose.
Yeah. Let's go to the next slide if we can, please. We've covered some of this stuff already. The Act talks about a party, an agent, participant. Let's figure out what those terms are. A person who files for an application or is the subject of or proceeding involving a license permit or some other entitlement for use. So that's what the act applies to. What doesn't apply to? It doesn't apply for ordinary professional services. WillDAN, for example, provides services here. A number of other contractors provide services. Attorneys provide services here. Unless the applicant goes toward a decision that the council made regarding a license or a permit or some sort of real estate related entitlement, this Levine Act doesn't apply. So it is complicated, but it's right now it's just a subset. Look for future amendments to the Levine Act to broaden the scope of what this applies to. Honestly. Let's go to the next slide. A participant. So the participant, the word participant as not the first person that's making the application, but somebody who opposes it, speaks out against it, somebody who speaks out in front and for it, somebody who is and has a financial interest in it. So Joe Resin comes in, lives at the other end of the street, or excuse me, the other end of the city, just wants to say, I don't think, pick your topic, warehouse A should come in on the opposite end of the city. They have a financial interest? Likely not. Why? Because the real estate is more than 500 feet away. They're not getting paid by or for somebody that is opposing in support of. They're just a resident who's engaged in civic participation, who happens to write a check to you, right? If they don't have a financial interest here, they're not in. Rob and I talked about some of the dangers. I talked about that, Rob. The potential danger of somebody that might want to take you out, being able to vote.
Yeah, I mean, there's always the worst case scenario, but we were thinking about somebody who, perhaps was across town on one issue, like if you donate, but that was their interest at the time. Let's say something goes sour in a relationship and an issue shows up a few months later near their home, and then they want to state that donation was something related to that to trip up, the recusal. The council member, I mean, that's worst case scenario, but when they're talking through, if that was to happen, a nice way to cleanse that issue can be returning the funds.
Just get the money back.
And then you can get out of any potential situation. But that's sort of the worst case scenario we arranged.
Yeah, so a participant is someone who supports, opposes the pending decision, and who has a financial interest. Two components, two tests. They oppose it, they support it, and they have financial interest. If they don't oppose it, they don't support it, they're just silent, they have a financial interest in it, not an issue of the weekend.
Yeah, I go back and ask if I return the funds, but my political campaign is now closed. Do I return it to personal funds?
We'll get to that, answer. I think you have to return it, but I don't have something in
I
mind.
already use the political funds for the campaign, does that make sense? So now the committee's closed. So how do I?
It's a great question. I'll have to get back to you.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next definition, if we could. Agency, we already not spend a lot of time here. City council, planning commissioner, one of the two most important agencies here that would be affected. Housing authority, you sit on the housing authority, that could involve real estate, entitlement, building permits, things of that sort here. Next slide, please. Officer just means elected official or appointed official. Next slide. Or a candidate. Let's not forget about that. A candidate. Running for office. Okay, and then a license, permit, or other entitlement for use. So these are all business, professional, trade, and land use licenses, permits, and all entitlements for use, including all entitlements for land use and all contracts other than competitively bid, labor, or personal employment contracts, and all franchisees. We have a number of franchisees here, but the contracts, other than those, are competitively bid, labor, personal employment contracts. Why is that? Because when you bid out on a contract to do work or public work, you have to select the lowest responsible bidder, right? So you don't have any choice. So the purposes for the MENA really underserved that level, you have to go for those responsibilities. And so that's why that's been taken. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Contributions, include contributions to candidates, committees and federal, state, and local elections. Okay? I don't want to spend too much time on that. Is that another slide after that?
Well, let me ask you a quick question on that one. I asked this question because we don't know who's making contributions to other committees that support a candidate. The only thing we know are the contributions that are coming to our campaigns. So if somebody's putting money into a committee, unbeknownst to us, how do we dispose of it? We don't know.
There's a knowledge requirement, and we'll talk about that once we get into the PPC. But it's when you become aware, right? And so if somebody's giving money to a campaign that you do not control, right? They still have to report in some instances some of those contributions up to Sacramento. It's a question about whether or not you're being acknowledged by that, whether you have a duty to review those statements. I haven't seen any literature yet on that. So that whole knowledge center still has to be developed there. I don't have any more insight on that. It's another one of those areas that still needs to be developed. We already talked about the operative statute is 84308. We already went through the definitions here. Let's go to the next slide. These are just disclosure statements. We can go through this. These are questions that we would be asking other vendors, company or you or your company or agent on behalf of you or your company. So this is both you in your individual capacity, you and as a company representative, made any political contributions of more than $250 to the mayor, vice mayor, and the council members in the 12 months preceding the date of the issuance of this request for proposal or request for qualifications. That's the contract term. Let's go to the next slide. Your company, etc., on your behalf, on the company's behalf, anticipate or plan to make any political contributions. If so, please identify as a council member. Next slide. If you answer yes to either of those two questions, answering yes doesn't preclude Southgate from awarding a contract. It does, however, preclude the council member from participating in the contract award process. So that, if you're planning on making a contribution, you know now that could impact the ability of the council member to purchase. Next slide. Okay, so let's go to, in the interest of time, because I do know we have a closed session here. I do want to ask you to make sure you take home the FPPC guidebook here that's been made part of this pamphlet here.
The screen would first do disclosure statement number 1.
Yes.
I'm sorry, no, okay, I just saw the screen go dark. I want to make sure that we're still on live.
We're still live, right?
So on statement, disclosure statement number 1, have you or your company or an agent on behalf of you or your company made any political contributions more than 250? Who are we talking about when we say agent on behalf? Could those also be lobbyists
Yes.
or advocates?
Yes. Someone who received compensation in order to influence the decision, either to support it or to oppose it. It could include a check it would include the aggregation of money. So it could include if there's a check written by the company, if the check is written by a shareholder of the company, an owner of the company, towards that, you have to aggregate all of those interests. So if you have 3 shareholders of the company, and they are all 3 owners of the company, and each one of those shareholders writes a check for $100 to you. You have to aggregate all 3 checks for $300, even though on their face, it's only $100. And now you've exceeded the limit of voting actors moving $50 in that scenario. I had a question posed to me by another client on Southgate where Company A was the party. But for liability purposes, Company A was owned by, all the shares of Company A were owned by Company B. And all the shares of Company B were owned by Company C. And they went up the ladder to Company E. And the question is, do I have to get all the shareholders to disclose whether or not they make contributions at Company A level, B level, all the way up to Company E level? And while it's not exactly written out in stone, my answer was no, likely not. Why? Because Levine Act says it's the owners of the company. So in my scenario, the only owners of Company B were, Company A were the owners of Company B. All the other companies were, yes, indirect owners, but they were indirect owners through their respective shares. And the statute doesn't talk about indirect ownership. Again, look for changes in the future, right? Because this would be a way to circumvent what the Levine Act is intended to do. But right now, the statute is focused on owners. And you have to aggregate the donations by the owners. So that's why keeping track of that is vitally important.
You know, and just so that you know, I mean, I think we went through this, I can't remember what the issue was that came before us, but you and I reached out to the FPPC to get advice whether I can participate in an item.
Right.
It was a trash line, and it took like 2 months for them to get back to us. Remember that?
Right.
And these kind of things are, if they were that simple, and black and white, it'd be easy, but they want to make things black and white. And so to get back to us might be delaying some decisions, yeah. But again, I think the best thing to do is just continue to monitor ourselves, keep track of who's making donations, and then, you know, be on the safe side. I think this council, going back to, you know, after the Robles era, I think every council team that I've been involved in has always taken the highest road possible, and even recusing ourselves when we didn't have to.
Other than abundance of caution.
Yes.
Stay on the line from our next manager, right? That's exactly right.
And so again, I think this is just going to make us continue to do what we've done.
I've enjoyed the back and forth because I feel like we are answering the questions there. What I really want to do is ask you again to make sure that you take home and keep close to you the FPPC guidelines and the regulations that are there. And there'll be periodic updates. As those updates become available, I'll try to get those distributed to you as well so that you can have them on there, because there'll be constant updates. But if you just take a look at the contents of the outline here, this is page 5 of the agenda packet. If I could ask you to all turn there, take a look at what the FPPC thinks are the relevant headlines here. A proceeding, what is it? Page 3. And this is the FPPC writing to people that are applying for a permit. So it's not really directed to you guys, it's more directed to them. But it asks them, am I a party, am I a participant, am I an agent, right? So you can take a look at this and educate yourselves on whether any of your proposed contributors would fall within this category. That's why I selected this aspect of it. We already talked about who qualifies as an officer of an agency. We talked about the entitlement proceeding, when does it become pending, when they initially file for that. You have to be aware of that. That's something that staff can provide assistance on. And, you know, as we go through this, even in writing the staff reports, we can ask staff and move on to make sure they indicate when, in these kinds of proceedings, when was the application first filed. provide information for the available to you.
Probably, just, I think this is one of those dumb questions that I'm gonna ask it. What if we don't know who owns the business, or if they are a owner of the business? I received a check from an individual, and I don't know what business they have in our city, or if they have one to begin with.
Yeah, and so that's really interesting because the Levine Act imposes what they call a rebuttable presumption. So you're going to be presumed to have known if somebody owns a particular business, might be a participant, if their property is within 500 feet of whatever the property is that is the subject of the application. So what does that mean? You're going to have to be aware of who's within that 500-foot zone, and then you're going to have to make that determination there, right? But we all know that even in those situations, it's impossible to tell because in my example, company A is owned ultimately by company E. You may not know. You may have gotten a check by company E, and not know or have any reason to believe that there's even a link between company E and company A. You may not know that. But if they're within 500 feet, you're going to be asked to presume to know that.
Or even an individual, I received a contribution from an individual, shows up to my campaign kickoff, issues me a check. I don't know what business they're from. I don't know, whether, if they have a business here. Is it the candidate's responsibility or the elected official's responsibility to go out and identify if they own a business in our community?
I think the act doesn't require you to do that. But in many ways, that's the implication of the act. You should know, where your source of money is coming from. You should know that. Right? Like banks, what do they tell tellers to avoid money laundering? Right? What do they say? What?
Know your customer.
No, you don't. Now, you won't find that, but that sort of goes to the issue of acting with prudence, right? No, you don't. No, you don't. To the extent you can. I think that's the safe bet there. You won't find that language in here, but that's exactly what the act is trying to address. Is, will your vote, have you received compensation from somebody who may benefit, and are you knowingly making a decision to benefit that individual? Knowingly. That's the issue.
Yeah, I mean, just to, the history.
I hope that answers your question.
It does, and it still leaves it open, right? Because like an attorney would really,
No, but it's because
Like the
we
law.
can't figure out
Right.
every potential scenario.
yeah, because for instance, an example where I don't know the individual if they own a business, but if I have to presume that I need to identify what they do, it's in our best interest to, when we have these campaign events, that when we receive a check, that we ask those questions on a form, maybe, as we collect those donations, is, here's a check from who you do, and do you have a business in our city? Is a question, it should be a question that's also put on there. Just as a way for us to identify.
Let me just say, I keep records of that, where they work, because we want to make sure that, for example, a company makes a donation, let's say, and let's go with the extreme, let's say they make the maximum donation of 1,000, and an employee who works for them cannot make that contribution because you're limited to the 1,000. So you have to know where they're from. And I believe in the records I keep, because I always ask them, what company do you work for, and we disclose it.
That goes on the 460.
That's right.
That's why you need to report it.
Right, so-
460s. If you get a check and they say here, it's a personal check,
Yeah.
it's not a company check.
Yeah.
You always need to assess who's your
That's-
employer,
Yeah.
so that you can note it down on the 460s. But I would agree, maybe we should add, or, like city attorney, maybe we can give you a directive, maybe just a sample of a contribution form where it will cover ourselves through the Levine Act, so that it gives us kind of like an understanding of, like you said, we should have known. of asking, are you a business owner? How is something going to there? So that it's clear and transparent, so that when somebody's giving us a contribution, we have to answer those questions before we accept the funds. Just out of precaution for those of us that are going to be running and those that are going to be running in the future. Because I don't see this going away anytime soon, even if the legislators say, we pass on these laws, but we weren't sure what we were doing.
What I can do is I can reach out to the PPC and see if they have any guidance that they can offer there. I'm not sure I feel comfortable drafting a
And
contribution
see what
form,
happens.
but let's see what the FPPC has and if they have any guidance there. Rob?
I don't, that's a tough one. I think that's how that gets laid out, even how do you determine the right question to ask so that you get the right answer, and what company you work for, I work for company A, but I have an interest in company B. You didn't ask me what project I'm backing, and then you have to ask that, you have to ask who you're related to, who maybe has an interest. And at some point it gets tough, and so I don't envy your folks' job, and I think it's, as we said, clarity from the FPPC will come, but abundance of caution again, that's my word for the day.
Madam Mayor, so, kind of hearing the discussion, a lot of the vendors out there are people that give. Usually they give because it's not because they're a good person. A lot of times they give because, they have some interest, right? I would think that the majority of people have some interest, but I also see the side of vendors, once they become familiar with this new law, that they're going to look at ways to maybe, maybe give it to a private person to give a check instead of me, the company. I mean, I'm just thinking that because there's always ways that you put in laws, but people always try to figure ways around the laws, right? So I'm just kind of pointing that out because it doesn't happen.
Well, this is what started this whole thing. There were some real shady things that happened, I believe, in LA and Huntington Park, for example, that really caused us to come to where we're at now. And, I, as a resident, member of the community, actually appreciate the fact that these kind of things are out there to prevent that nonsense from happening. That's how we got in trouble back in the 1990s. And we lived with that, but it took us a lot of battles to get it done. And the only objection I have to this is the lack of clarity. And even those that pass this in law to say, that's a great question, I don't know, and I said, well, you have a great answer, and no, I don't, I'll get back at you. Doesn't give me a lot of assurance, so we just have to be careful. Thank you.
City Attorney, so at this time, I'd like to open it to the audience if you don't have anything else.
I don't have anything further, more to come on this topic. Please take a look at the FPPC materials that are there, and Madam Mayor, if we want to have a continued session on this after the turn of the year, as we monitor it, as maybe once a quarter, for the next couple of quarters, just to monitor this, see where we're going, particularly with the elections coming up. If you think that's beneficial, happy to do that. And if you do have questions in the interim, we can bring those together and then bring them back.
Right, and maybe we can do a combined meeting with the planning commission or any other commissions that we have so that we have to date what's
I think that makes a lot of sense. It can be a joint meeting with all the commissioners.
Yes.
And certainly once at the highest level of the planning commission, but there are others that need to play a role as well.
Exactly, but I would add to that we get at some monthly updates, of anything that has changed, just so that we're abreast of what's happening with the FPPC and the new, changes that are coming down, because I don't want you to wait 3 months and then let us know, and then we're all like, what did they let us know?
Yeah, well, what I can do is I can calendar visit to the FPPC website at the end of every month. At the beginning of the following month, send out no new change, or here are some decisions, here's some examples, here's some reading materials, etc.
Thank you so much. So with that, we're going to go ahead and open it up to any members of the audience that are here in council chambers. Seeing none, closing the audience portion, we're going on to Zoom.
Mr. Dominguez?
Go ahead. Mr.
Okay.
Dominguez.
Okay, so I spoke with the vice mayor this morning, and I said to him, I asked him, look, do the commissioners need to participate with this meeting? And he said, no, because they're not running for office. And here I find out that the commissioners are going to be affected by this. And that was the thing I wanted to say to the vice mayor, that you need your appointees to show up for this meeting, because this is information that pertains to them too, this Levine Act. You know what, Mr. Sweetness, most of what you said just went right over my head. I mean, I'm just too dumb to understand all the, everything you laid out. But the last, I don't know, two slides, for your last 3 slides I didn't get, and the big takeaway I got from this meeting is that basically the council members need to be direct and upfront and disclose all their campaign contributions. I don't want the council members to give any ammunition to the 2 jackals that we have running wild on the internet, which is Tradition Buckley and Mr. Mussolini Montalvo. We've all seen how they hounded the hell out of the vice mayor because he's the president of the South AJA. They keep going up his ass about because he's the president, he's running a corrupt organization, and then he's profiting from the snack bar, and then he's taking away business from the street vendors. We don't know this. I don't want the council members to give these 2 fools any ammunition, any excuse for them to rail against the council coming in 2024. And look, it was a long point. Was it? Put it all in the list, type it up, and hand it over to the city manager, whoever the hell is in charge of this, making sure that all the campaign, contributions are being disclosed, and just give it over to the city manager and let it have it on file. And I just want the council members to be on top of this, so that you guys can shut down these 2 fools and not give them any excuse to slander the council members. That's all.
Thank you. Next comment?
Mr. Buckley?
Go ahead, Mr. Buckley.
Hi, Councilor. So curious if the $200 in contributions, is that only going to be election related? Or can it apply after the elections? For example, what about contributions made to a nonprofit organization of a council member? Or ones that council members work with? Maybe even like their own. When you state contributions, are we thinking purely money, cash, or can it also be subject to services and or other items received? Ron, by the way, I want to thank you for taking the time to explain all this. I brought this up at the last council meeting. I didn't hear any of the council members disclose that they received more than $250 from IRS at that council meeting. So I'm hoping you guys did it. But anyway, you know what? The other thing that kind of concerns me is the drawing straws. That's the contingency plan if all 5 of the council members have received contributions 50 or more. My concern is that it only behooves the company to pay all of it, thereby defeating the entire purpose of the shielding, as well, of corruption. And as we know, a lot of the community is very skeptical of this council. Again, I brought it up before, but in June, the entire city council was shut down because of that. So, does that mean that if a company pays out all 5 council members that we just kind of bypass this bill because they're going to go anyway, all 3 are paid for? What is the point of having then 3 versus 5 voting if all 5 were already paid off? So I just think it actually encourages these people to donate more, not less, to these council members so that they can pay off all 5. I think it actually defeats the spirit of the law, and it really doesn't prohibit or mitigate against corruption. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller?
Mr. Montalvo?
Go ahead, Mr. Montalvo.
There we go, am I on?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Great presentation, Will. I think you're gonna definitely do some more on it because it's pretty lengthy. I would say pay attention to San Diego. I think specifically up on, there's a case already going on where they're work, it is a lot of gray areas, but to be specific, or pay attention to San Diego. They're falling like crazy down there. And, I'm listening to, and thank you, Al, Mr. Rios. That was a good example. People do not give you money without expecting something. You know, they're not dropping $1,000, you know, on a campaign donation and then $5,000 on a pack or a because they like you. You know, you're gonna do something for them. So that's a perfect example, and it's true, to be honest with you. I can kind of feel you guys sweating right now. Like, this is not good for someone. The people that ask the most questions are the most guilty. Like, you didn't mention anything about like nonprofits, other entities and organizations, that falls in. This is a rebound. And $250 is not enough, unless you guys can get by paying the money back, which I doubt you guys will. I'm trying to work my speech carefully because, you know, I understand that I have a big impact in this community of what I do and say, so I want to make sure everything comes out clearly and, you know, my followers, you know, understand what I'm speaking about. But this is a great app. It's gonna kind of level up some people that, you know, get your money from PACs and IEs and, you know, these little underhanded cash donations. And I'm just listening, like, how can you take a check and not know where it's coming from without even verifying it? And just to answer the question too, you don't have to live in the city to give a campaign donation. So you might want to look at that. And now, this is going to put South Bay on the map for all the wrong reasons. And don't worry, you don't have to look at all these donations yourself, myself, and, you know, quite a few people will be looking into it for you, making sure you're being transparent with your gifts. And also, Rory forgot to mention, in-kind donations also are part of this agreement. So it has monetary value, not just a campaign donation. So again, you only did it less than an hour. There's a lot to go through this, but make sure they know about it because some people like state dinners that cost over $300.
Thank you. No one else, madam. Have you seen the closing down into working on it, bringing it back to council, or the wishes of council?
So, yeah, it's a decision file. And so I'll make a motion on that and then I have some comments to make.
I'll second that.
Okay, so, further discussion at this point. So again, this is for the comment that Mr. Dominguez made, and again, and I apologize if I wasn't clear to Mr. Dominguez. The question was, this for the planning commissioners. And the idea is, it's really not for the planning commissioners per se, because they don't take contributions, but if they're running for office and they're taking contributions, and again, that would apply to anybody, even someone who's not an appointed official or is not an elected official at this time. If they're going to run for office, they need to keep track of where the donations are coming from, and that's what I meant to explain to Mr. Dominguez, and I'll call him later on, I'll call tomorrow, I'll go into more detail on that one. I want to say that I know that a lot of companies have made donations to elected officials in the past. I recall we had a company here in Jersey, it's a tree trimming company, and that tree trimming company gave every elected official the maximum. But when the contract came up, we all voted and gave the contract to somebody else. Because at the time, that company, and I don't want to mention the name of it, but it was a tree company that we had in the past. And I had gotten complaints from staff that they were behind on the contract. I reached out to the contact person I had. I said, I understand you're like 3 months behind. You need to catch up. What's going on? Later on, when their contract came up, they were 6 months behind. And even though they made contributions of the maximum $1,000 to every council member, we went against them. And again, so again, I can tell you with the council that I'm working with here now, you don't put us all in the same basket as some people who've been out there in the past. There are people who make contributions to us. We're not for sale. What they're getting out of us is honest government, and people want to make those suggestions that this is some nefarious thing going on. That's a political attack more than anything else. If I were to see some shenanigans from any of my council colleagues, I would be pointing them out, and I would hope they do the same. They feel that I'm doing something out of line with what's being done or what has been done in the past. I would expect them to say something. But the mere suggestion tonight that this is what we've done, that's not the case. That is not the case. The issues that were brought up about contributions from IRS, that's in the forms that we've submitted. All our contributions are there. And any contribution that we received from IRS was prior to January 1st of 2023. But that's still in our records. And so that if we're able to vote on anything this year, that has nothing to do with it. And that's what the law is. So to suggest that something was done and we should have recused ourselves, okay, nice try, but that's not what we've got here. And I bring that up because, these comments keep on coming, attacking this council. And it does not help. It does not help if you have some basis of these facts in there would be one thing, but these political attacks, and again, this is what Mr. Dominguez is talking about. He's tired of all these attacks. The nonprofits, they go on and on. But again, at this time, I am comfortable with this council and every council member that I've worked with going back to 2005. But again, thank you.
Madam, just before we do the vote, I just want to correct something that I said to make it abundantly clear. To what the act applies to includes this phraseology called entitlements for use. And that phrase, entitlements for use, is not defined in the statute. And so the FEPC issued a regulatory letter, May 9, 2023 of this year, in which it considered the phrase entitlements for use to include small purchase order contracts. So there are some contracts that will fall within the scope of this, and that will be subject to more clarification. But I do want to alert you to the materials here. I just want to make sure I clarify a point I made in tonight's presentation. Thank you.
I just want to say, because I know that when you're campaigning, a lot of times, people give you money, and we used to say, well, yeah, and for access, more so than a quid pro quo. I mean, it's really, in my effort, I accept the contribution, but it was not because I was going to vote for whatever they wish. It was more for access. I guess is that out the door, or because that's the line that a lot of electeds use. I mean, and it doesn't mean that we're just going to, because they give us money, that we're going to vote away. We're still going to hear everything and that's so just going
Just to
that.
clarify your question, when you say access to
To returning their call,
Just
speaking with them and
Representation. In other words, representation, which is our job. We represent the community, we represent the employees, we represent the business world. And a lot of times people want people who are accessible. And that's why they support candidates. And so, again, when we vote on contracts, we vote based on staff's recommendation. Sometimes it's the lowest bidder. So again, the mere suggestion of stuff, don't let that get to you. This is, we're here, we're getting educated on something new. But I've known you for many years, Mr. Rios, and I've never seen you bow down to anybody because they gave you a donation. And the mere suggestion that was made by people but tonight, there's nothing to it, but you're gonna see it's gonna be twisted somehow. Don't worry about it.
Well, Councilman Rios, I would respond this way is that, like Vice Mayor, I've seen you, take phone calls, I've seen you participate in meetings, I've seen you interact in the community, and never once have I seen you say, well, I'm not gonna talk to you because you didn't make a contribution, right? And that's not who this council is, any of anything. You are a dedicated leader within the community. And what you're doing is you're just serving in this representative capacity as a council member, here to be attuned to the needs of the community, in whatever form those needs may arise. Sometimes it's people making phone calls to you, you respond to those calls, irrespective of whether they're making contributions to you or not. I think that's what you're trying to say, that's how I interpret your comment.
And just by knowing, look, I looked at everybody's form when they're running for office, and I looked at yours, I looked at Joshua, I looked at Maria's. Mine's are there for the looking as well. And, I think the disclosure of that information is out there. Anybody who wants to take a look at it, they're welcome to it, but again, we have speakers coming out tonight. There have been questions about some of those forms that they filled out, missing information, but you don't see us talking about it here tonight, but could I usually do it? Absolutely. But we're not in high school, we're not here to play games, we're here to conduct the business of the city. And tonight what we're doing is being educated, but we're also doing it openly so that people understand we didn't have to really do this. It's our job to know the law. We were informed that these changes have taken place. Look, I have people who want to contribute to my company. What I told them? Not yet. Until we get all the information, because I will not take any of your money without letting you know what potentially is out there. And it's going to be up to you if you want to contribute or not. And that's the way this council is made. So again, I appreciate the comments, but let's not make it political. This is an education for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam City Clerk, roll call. Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Councilmember Lavallette.
Yes.
Councilmember Rios.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hurtado.
Yes.
And Mayor Alvarez. Yes. So now we are going into a closed session. Madam City Clerk, you can read that into the record. Item number 1, conference with legal counsel pending litigation pursuant to governing code section 54956.9A, 54954.9 BTC, A, N9 Development versus City of Southgate, B, Edward Huffman versus City of Southgate, C, Aurelia Enache versus City of Southgate, D, Esteban Hernandez versus City of Southgate, County of Los Angeles, et al. Thank you, Madam City Clerk. So at this point, I'd like to open it to a member of the audience in City Council chambers. That's a question on items 1, A, through B. Seeing none, I'm closing the audience portion, moving it on to Zoom. Mr. Dominguez, go ahead, Mr. Dominguez.
Okay, Mr. Salinas, if you could give me some background on the B, Huffman versus Southgate. I noticed on the agenda it says WCAB. What does that mean? What does that entail? What is Huffman suing the city for? And then for D, where it says Esteban Hernandez, Southgate, County of Los Angeles, he acts all. So there's like multiple, case against us, the county. I don't know what is this about. The one Hernandez, you can clarify. And regarding another development, okay, so Mr. Steve, please tell me, after, I believe it was December of last year that the urban orchard was put on halt because of this LA County agency. So then we had to go into a lawsuit with our development. Please tell me that you have some good news and that this thing is coming to a close. And if not, if it isn't wrapping up, could you give me an approximation of when this thing is going to finally come to an end in our development? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dominguez. Next caller, Mr. Montalvo. Go ahead, Mr. Montalvo.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Thank you, well, this is just on, development question, but also, since, the longer, litigation takes, the more it's gonna cost us. I didn't answer everything, but if you can just give maybe, a ballpark figure where we're at with that. I've been following this since, it happened, and I'm really concerned that we're gonna get nailed with the liability or a breach of contract issue with that. And, it's looking like a couple of $1 million, just from what I see from reading the reports of that contract that was breached. Or not breached, you guys, the council voted to get out of it. So, if you can, I know you're doing so if you can, it's anything just to go with. And, I know when you go through stressful things like this, it's hard not to get triggered. When people like myself ask questions about, issues like this. So it's really important to remember why you're there and not take it so personal. And if you can't give information or if you're corrupt or anything like that, and, litigation affects you in ways like this, it's unfortunate. I'm trying, again, I know my words echoed out with a lot of people, so I'm trying to be specific, since my words are very important to a lot of people. And, but Gil, I know you're sweating right now. You're pretty getting it, bro.
Thank you. Next caller, Mr. Buckley. Go ahead, Mr. Buckley.
Hi, I'm Buckley. I brought up several times about inner development and jurisdiction. We keep seeing this, whether it's litigation, or the first or second item on every single agenda, and it really concerns me that it's been lingering. It's going into 2024. And every time I've asked about this particular topic or entity, it's just always been, the war guy, or taking care of everything good. But anything that lasts and lingers this long, it always costs. None of this is free. All services aren't free. There's a team of lawyers, aren't doing this for long, I'm sure. And even if in the smallest chance there is a pro bono incident going on here, or everybody is holding off on charging, I think we only increase the odds that something big will happen, or that some payments are going to have to be made on our end or their end. The buildup is not that great. To the council members, I'm going to ask you to just please abide by the First Amendment so that myself and other citizens can express their opinions about retaliation. I've warned you about this before, so please don't make me file a report against you guys. If you don't like what I have to say or anybody else, do what your mom always says, doesn't say anything at all. But I'm just holding my government accountable. My forefathers encouraged it. Your forefathers encouraged it. They wrote it into the Constitution. So please abide by the Constitution, the First Amendment, and I encourage you guys to read it. We can petition our government. It's encouraged in the very First Amendment. We may petition our government for redress of grievances. So it doesn't matter what you feel, but all I ask is that you please don't retaliate against our community, because we are the people, and you serve us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller? No more calls. Seeing none, I'm closing the audience portion. City Attorney?
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you very much. I appreciated the comments from those speakers as it was directed toward NR development. It is true that we've been involved in this litigation with NR development for a number of years. Tonight, the City Council will be considering a settlement proposal there, and we'll report out to what extent there is action taken in that matter. I will just say, for the benefit of the public, that litigation is very slow. And so the idea of what you see on TV, where a case gets resolved within 22 minutes and a half hour, everything gets expedited, it just does not happen there. And the city does have a responsibility to protect the public fisc. I will tell you that This particular case was complicated because it involved a number of claims that the city fought back on and did not believe that there was merit in those claims. And so when you have one side saying yes, and we have one side saying no, you just have to bear out and fight those fights there. What do? The council has a great team of staff consultants that assisted the city attorney's office. We relied heavily on them and their work, and it was their work that led to assessing what the true amount of the claim should be that should be paid to NR development, taking into account a number of risk factors, the risk of that a higher amount could be given, as well as standing firm on those claims where the city truly believed there was not a basis for asserting the claim. And in the end, NR backed down on a number of those claims, which then led to the possibility of having a proposed settlement. So we'll be discussing that proposed settlement there, but in the 20 years I have served as city attorney, I don't recall another construction claim coming before the city. I say that because sometimes the things that are most important are those that are not present. And we do not have a history of litigation with our contract vendors because the council, the city staff takes a good look at those documents, sees, and has a strong record of responding to our contractors there. This was a unique circumstance because the advent of the cease order and then having to make sure that we compensated NR, but we compensated them responsibly without just being a money grab that could have been a situation. So that's what we'll be talking about in NR development there. I don't have a precise number of what our fees are in the case. If I had to venture, I would say there's somewhere between 50 to 80,000. I wish I had a more specific number, but there were serious needs that were had here, a significant amount of discussion, mediations, but there was more money really spent on responding to the cease and desist order. And I'll tell you again that the role of the city attorney was a backseat role to the work that was being done by staff and our outside consultants. I do think this case was managed very efficiently. I may be overstating the amount of our actual fees in this case, but it was complicated. There are a number of fees, and I do think that a good result will follow if the council agrees. But item number 1B, Huffman versus City Southgate. Mr. Huffman has filed a claim under seeking workers' compensation benefits. The phrase or the letters WCAB refer to this being a workers' compensation matter. WCAB refers to Workers' Compensation Appeals Board. So it's an administrative tribunal that is assigned the responsibility for resolving these cases. The city will be hearing a presentation by an outside lawyer representing the city in that manner. The case of Aurelia Nachi versus City of Southgate is a tort case, a sidewalk slip and fall that will be going to trial. We do try cases here where we believe there is merit. This is really a status report for the city and a request for guidance and direction. Esteban Hernandez is another slip and fall case. It named the city of Southgate, but also named the county of Los Angeles. This occurred on a sidewalk within the city of Southgate. Sometimes the plaintiff's attorneys include the county of Los Angeles out of an abundance of caution. That is how the case is entitled, and that's why the name of the county of Los Angeles appears. And all is just Latin for and others, but it really is a case involving a single defendant at this point, and that's the city of Southgate. That completes my response, I believe, to the questions that were raised.
Thank you, City Attorney.
Madam Mayor.
Vice Mayor Thel.
Yes, so a couple of things. First of all, I just want to get this out there. So in regards to the freedom of speech, it applies to everybody, including council members. So whatever comments we make, I'm entitled to them as well. And I've said this before. One of my favorite people in history was Voltaire. He actually said, I may not agree with what you have to say, but I will fight to the death to let you say it. So anybody wants to make comments here, they're welcome to them. Whether there's truth to them or not, that's up to the listening to make their own mind up. But if I make a comment and offend you, that's just how I have the freedom of speech as well. I do want to mention that I will be recusing myself from the discussion with the NR because of the issue being very close to my property. And if the council is fine with it, deal with the other items first, and leave that one to the end, and then I can make my way out.
Yes. Yes, Vice Mayor, that would be my recommendation, that we take NR up last and discuss this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Lopez. And again, City Manager, welcome to our city, council meeting. So we have one, 2, 4, 7, 6, 20, 7. Thank you.